What's up, y'all? And of course, welcome to another alternative factuals video. Recording this on a lovely Sunday, having an off day from, the day job, or, well, not necessarily a day job because, I have nighttime shifts, but from the regular job, the main stream of income that allows me to do this channel, of course, as it continues to grow. But what we're going to be talking about today is The Watchmen season 1. So I'm recording this the day that technically is going to come out on HBO. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to break down some history, some events, as well as clear up some misconceptions about the show and the intentions of the whole Tulsa, Oklahoma situation when it came to the first episode. And some people felt like it was very SJW, or some other people obviously understood, what was going on in terms of the reference. And some people just really had no idea or no opinion about it. So we're going to be diving into that, getting into those details. But before I dive into any of those, related subject matters and all that jazz, please be sure to like, share, and of course subscribe. Leave your comments down below. Let me know what you're thinking. Let me know what you're feeling. And without further ado, let's kind of just dive into this, my dear. Okay, so for those of you who are not really aware of what that really was, the whole Tulsa Oklahoma massacre, or the Tulsa race riot, was an event that took place on the dates of May 31st of 1921 to June 1st, 1921. Now, basically, the Tulsa race riot, or the massacre, was an event that took place where, the white residents attacked black residents and the businesses of Greenwood District in Tulsa, Oklahoma. And it has been called the single worst incident of racial violence in American history for several reasons, which I will go over throughout the course of this video. Now, the deaths that are on record since 1921 was 36, I guess the official death count. But the unofficial, or the estimated deaths, were actually ranging from 100 to 300 people, because obviously certain groups of people were never found, and back in those times records were not kept as tight compared to 2019 or 2020, or what our future will allow us to keep, just because technology has advanced, as well as what we're able to access, in terms of when it comes to writing things down. So let's kind of see how this all relates together. Now, the reason why in the Watchmen universe, or the Watchmen show, the reason why they made this reference was because I made this comment in another video where, for the most part, people don't really understand the Watchmen universe as a whole, because the premise or the foundation of this universe was very much built on historical choices, and as well as very racially charged situations, or just things that were very representative of socio-economic situations that were happening during certain aspects of American history. Now, the reason why this event still played out at the time that it did in the TV show was simply because, for the most part, when it comes to the whole Watchmen universe, the history actually still follows the history that we have up until a certain point. Things don't actually change when it comes to the American history and the way that things transpired until about the 1940s in terms of the Watchmen universe. All the way from the 1940s down, history was the same for that universe as well as this universe in terms of the way history and how it played out. That's the reason why that event was relevant to the episode. So basically, this event was a way for them to establish okay, yes, the Tulsa race riot did happen in 1921. These are the events that caused the whole situations of race relations, and the strenuous relationship between those who are African American, those who are white, as well as situations that Black Wall Street, for example, where communities where there was African Americans thriving, succeeding, and all that stuff basically were under attack by people who believed that white people were the supreme racial beings in the planet, and they felt like black people should not have those kind of things. Now, when it comes to the Watchmen universe, like I said, this ties into the choices as well as the political things that turned out. And obviously, we know in the 60s, in terms of politics, it comes to racial related things, because in the 1960s, had Martin Luther King, who was fighting for equal rights between people of color, as well as having equal access to education, all that stuff, and the marching. I'm pretty sure a lot of you at least know that. At least I would surely hope so. So those basic things. And the reason why this was, like I said, brought up in episode 1 was because it was a comparison to yes, this led to these events. These events are tied to the future events. So remember, in episode 1, we see that Regina King's character is actually dealing with a group who's very much reminiscent of the KKK, basically. And they're a supremacist group that basically targets people of certain race, certain ethnic backgrounds, and even though in which the areas that they lived was very reminiscent of those same people who we can kind of tie them to in this particular universe as well, our very own universe, I'll put it like that. So now when it comes to the Watchmen, the reason why these extremists, or these supposed I guess representation of the KKK, the reason why they wore Rorschach's mask, for example, was because Rorschach, even though he was a hero, Alan Moore did describe that Rorschach was indeed a person who was supposed to be kind of reminiscent of Batman. No superpowers, in terms of the way he went about solving mysteries. He was very cloak and dagger about his approaches. However, Rorschach was supposed to be a version of Batman in which you feel like, okay, yes, he is someone that is a bad example. He goes about things terribly wrong, where yes, even though Batman, he does break people's arms, he'll break your legs, he'll shatter your collarbones, of course, but he will not kill you. Rorschach, on the other hand, has no problem killing people. He feels like they're just, no, the world does not need you. And even though, yes, technically he was identified as a hero and he was morally ambiguous for a good amount of time, basically his mask represents extremist thoughts. And that's the reason why they use his mask in such a way, because the 7th Cavalry felt like, okay, Rorschach was someone who was different. Yeah, people didn't like him. Yeah, people thought he was scary. Yeah, people, may have found out about his personal life in terms of the things that he went through. But like I said, he lived an extremist life. And they clung to that ideology because they felt like their point of views have been identified not only as extremists, but they feel like they're right. Now, the next part of this event, or not even really an event per se, but the next part of this history was the fact that, okay, now we're tying this to the whole, Rorschach extreme list, the 7th Cavalry, the whole Tulsa race riot. What does this all have in common, or how is this all connected? And the reason why I say this is connected, or the reasons why, events transpired the way that they did, was because in the real world, in our world, for 75 years, the riot, the whole situation was something that was kept quiet for decades. No one really talked about the violence, the terror, and the losses during this event. Now, what transpired differently in the Watchmen universe was the fact that that was not the case for the time. So because of these events, obviously things transpired the way that they usually would, up until a certain point. But eventually somebody did take the time to discuss this happened in Tulsa, Oklahoma. And then basically these events transpired into, Nixon, abolishing the whole presidential rule, where basically they cannot, serve more than 2 terms, where now you have Redford, who can serve multiple terms for all eternity until he lives or dies, whatever the case may be. Now there's no limit to it. And then basically people did get some form of reparations in the form of Redfordations, which is, like I said, reparations, just, Redford's version of Redfordations, reparations basically. So for the most part, it is very, very indicative of this event led into the choices of other people kind of dealing with, the whole event. But instead of staying quiet about it for 75 years after the riot, like that, which pretty much happened in our, in our lives, in our universe, in our timeline, in this universe or their timeline, they didn't stay quiet about it for 75 years. Eventually, black people or people of color or whatever, they actually did manage to get some sort of reparations from the government, because they knew that these events were largely responsible by people who were of European descent. And then they did get those reparations, and then those people who were initially a part of the whole Tulsa, Oklahoma massacre, and basically felt like black people should not have those access to those goods, those rights, and any kind of money, for example. Then the reason why is the reason why like the 7th Cavalry kind of came into existence, because of the fact that they could not thrive the way that they did, in our timeline for a longer period of time, except they were exposed by the time Nixon came into play, and then that whole Redfordation situation. So basically this is the core event in which things started to transpire and choices were being made, in which the timeline would change into what it is today in the Watchmen universe in terms of the future. So remember, all of this is kind of a video to kind of describe that the reason why they did this whole situation in episode 1 was because this is the foundation in which things started to change in this universe. This is, I wouldn't even say the catalyst, but this is basically basically the base in which a lot of this happens, and then whatever choice was made later down the timeline that was a catalyst that caused this set of events to kind of take place coming into the show. So Tulsa, Oklahoma is a very important situation, is a very important massacre, and I think this is something that you should probably do a little bit more research on, get details about it, because in terms of the history itself, the show is not, I guess, changing anything about it. For the most part, it is very much the same information, and that information is going to be important because, like I said, this is the foundation in which that universe was made in terms of the choices that were different comparatively to what we are experiencing in our real world lives. So that's basically what I'm saying. But let me know what you think. Do you feel like, they're gonna do a little twist at the end of this where basically they're gonna be like, okay, yes, we're gonna, change some things about the Tulsa, Oklahoma situation just simply for the sake of changing it, or possibly they might just decide to, keep the events and, like I said, keep things going in terms of the choices that were made later on after the event. But let me know what you think about the Watchmen episode 1. I enjoyed it. I wouldn't say for obvious reasons, but I think it's a solid show so far. Based on the first episode, I think they're gonna do a good job with it, and based on what I've been reading, the research is gonna be a pretty interesting show to watch overall. And if you're new to the channel, please be sure to like, share, and of course subscribe. Leave your comments down below. Let me know what you're thinking. Let me know what you're feeling. And I hope to see you later on. Peace out.